Hello, DM Geezer Jin here. Apologies, taking a tiny break from reading the frickin' manual to actually talk about this section. Commentary coming soon, as well as some resources. So if you're here for me reading the book and nothing but reading the book, feel free to skip this video. My heart's not going to break. It's all good. I'm not going to be upset. You're here for the book. Stay here for the book. No worries. Or come back for the next video for the book. But if you're here to learn a little bit more about Greyhawk, if the last section piqued your interest, or if you're an old guy who's been sitting there crossing your arms going, you're crazy, you're full of shit, they're wrong, then this video is going to be for you. Okay. First thing I want to cover, and this is me opining a little bit here, is the presentation of Greyhawk within the 5th edition 2024 version is not canonical with the 1st edition, 2nd edition, any of that. But that's okay, guys. That's okay. We are trying to present Greyhawk as a setting that a brand new DM can make their own. A setting that is reflecting all of the tools, all of the principles, and all the concepts that we have been working through the DM's guide so far, okay? We are not trying to present, I truly believe the writers are not trying to present Greyhawk in any way other than to pique someone's interest and make the setting become their setting. Some of the timeline stuff is messed up. Some of the locations' names are messed up. Some of the plots and some of the stuff that they're presenting in this timeline are not what we're used to if you grew up with Greyhawk. That's okay. That's okay. The premise is to present Greyhawk as a sample setting to allow a new DM to practice all of the tools and tricks and techniques that we've been learning out in the book so far, to put it applicable, to drop the setting on the ground and go. I would prefer them using Greyhawk over Forgotten Realms simply because the Forgotten Realms has been tread upon. It's chewed up bubblegum stuck to the bottom of a fucking toilet at this point, man. That's been so overused that a new DM getting into the Forgotten Realms, they're going to drown in a sea of information, and they're going to drown underneath the weight and the expectation of a lot of the players, because our players have had as much exposure to the Forgotten Realms as our DMs have had. So I think Greyhawk, because it's so obscure, because it's so old and nearly forgotten, is a great place for a GM to start with a published setting. So let's say you started reading about this and you're like, this world is really freaking cool, man. Damn, I wish there was more out there for it. I like what they're saying here, but that's a lot of work for me to come up with all of those details. Well, you're in luck, because, you know, being an old Greyhawk grognard as I am, I have a big-ass library. So we're going to share some of the ideas with you guys, some of the resources with you if you wanted to advance your depth of knowledge in Greyhawk. But, disclaimer. The versions of Greyhawk that we're looking at, that we're going to look at here in a minute, are going to vary in some of the details, some of the timelines, and some of the places, names, and people from what you're looking at in this book. That's okay. You pick what you need to use, what you want to use, and you go. Because more so than any of the other settings out there, we're not going to see a video game popping up in Greyhawk. We're not going to see a movie coming out in Greyhawk. We're not going to see R.A. Salvatore suddenly start cranking out 50 books talking about Greyhawk here. So whatever version you choose and move forward with is your world. It's yours. You don't have to worry about someone coming out later and invalidating anything, kind of like what they did to us have been using 1E. Selfish rant there. Apologies. But, so all I'm going to do in the next few minutes, this video, is just go through some of the older sources. And then I'm not going through an exhaustive list of stuff here, okay? We're going to kind of look around in here. First, let's get to it. It all started with this folio, okay, 1980 published, TSR Presents the World of Greyhawk. Man, this was a little bitty half book. It wasn't even a full-size book, hence it being called a folio. Real quickly looking through this, it provided the consistency for the timeline, everything else that's going on with it, the Battle of Emery Meadows, a lot of the timeline stuff that we're reflecting on in the 5e book is also reflected here. As they said at the start of our section in Chapter 5, the version of Greyhawk that they are presenting in the 2024 book is representative of this version of Greyhawk, the 1980 folio publication of it. So shortly following the heels of this one that was published in 1980, we got what's called the first edition, the Gold Box, World of Greyhawk Fantasy Game Setting for use with AD&D First Edition rules. This was published in 83? 1983, yes. Now this gives us a lot more. It's a 140 page count. A lot of you're going to see a lot of the stuff that you already saw in the 5th edition book represented here with a lot more detail. So what I'm trying to say is, if you really, really, really liked what you've read, but you want more, you don't want to try to come up with all of the details yourself, you want to build on what's come before you, you can grab this first box set, and this is going to expand a lot on the details of the world. Geographically, economically, socially, giving you information on a little bit more, not a bunch more, a couple paragraphs maybe on each of the cities, or each of the things, the nations, the city-states, whatever. So whereas the 5e book had a sentence, this has got a couple paragraphs about each of the things that was discussed in the 5e book. This is another good place to go if you want some more, okay? The plus side of using the gold box is the timeline is the same. We are kicking forward in 576 CY, and here's some really cool shit, man. You got regional alignment charts, regional products, you know, what's being farmed, what's being mined, what is driving the economy in each of the major regions. Some good stuff here for world building. Getting into the highlands, the hills, the geographic regions, the features, all of that. Giving you lots of information, more details to flesh out the regions of the map that appeal to you without telling you exactly what lives where. There's a cave that has 16 of these on the 14th mountain west of the pass of blah blah. Not getting any of those granular details. You're getting more of a closer in view. The 5e book gave us a 30,000 foot view. This is giving you a 10,000 foot view. So you looked around from the 5e Greyhawk book and you're like, hey, that stuff looks cool. That stuff looks cool. I like that region. So you either A, get to create it all for yourself, which is fun, world building, home brewing, what we all end up doing anyway, or you can go into another level of publication, get this stuff to flesh out all the little bitty stuff, and then you can focus on the minute granular details. You can focus on the encounters and the adventures rather than trying to focus on the situations, the conflicts, and the hooks for each of these regions, right? We're still using our 5e terms as we have this discussion. So the gold box here is going to give you more detail. If you really like the 5e book, you want some more, this should be your next stop. Now, the second one, this is actually one my favorite. Well, Living Greyhawk is good too, but I use the Out of the Ashes quite a bit. I've moved the timeline forward to the end of the Greyhawk Wars. You're looking at an updated map. You're looking at a lot of the kingdoms, and the names of the countries that you saw in the 5e book aren't existing here, because this is 585 CY. We moved the timeline 9 years forward at the end of a war, okay? Other than that, a lot of the detail here is going to be the same as your gold box. All we did was moved what's happened to the world in the last 9 years. What happened since 576, since Ayaz went to war and took over a large portion of the world, and the Ivid the Undying took over the Malachite throne and turned everyone into a bunch of undead monsters as he continued reclaiming the world. What's the Scarlet Brotherhood now that they're a major power group? Because of the war, what does that look like? And. So there's a lot more design. There's a lot more detail if you want to move your story forward. I'm not trying to say you have to pick a timeline. Maybe you start out with the gold box, and as a dungeon master, you read through the From the Ashes to see where the entire world is going. And then you can design your campaigns to either fit in with these events or know what happened if your players went east instead of west. If we decided to help the Duchy of Joff against the Giants, that's cool. My group did that. What happened over on the Pomarge in the Free Cities League when Tarash Mack and the Orcish Hordes moved north against the Free Cities of Greyhawk? These are the things that will help you flesh out the rest of the world, because Greyhawk is a living, breathing, gigantic world full of conflict and strife that your players can't always address. They can only be in one place, right? They can only follow one of the major conflicts. They can only deal with one thing per campaign, one major thing. So if they're helping against the Giants and the Drow down in the southwest region in Keoland, they're not doing anything to help the Shieldlands as they get overrun by the fiendish army of Ayaz. If the party goes to the Isle of the Ape to find the Crook of Rao to fight against Ayaz, the Scarlet Brotherhood gets to run amok. And. So seeing where these major conflicts can resolve, either A, you get to use your imagination, or B, you can rely on more content to fill in those gaps for you, to guide larger, bigger picture campaign plots and themes to see what happens next. Greyhawk's a big ass world, man, and if you are, and I'm not trying to say you shouldn't. It's quite a challenge to keep everything moving, to keep all those plates spinning, to keep all those balls in the air, and to know what lands where based on your character's actions or directions. Because you're setting up all this crop. You got Ayas to the north, you've got Ivid to the south, you've got dragons all over the place, and you've got the Temple of Elemental Evil in the middle. Which do you choose? So your players aren't going to be able to deal with all of those. You certainly can't fold all of those plots, all of those conflicts into one plot. It feels heavy-handed, convoluted, and it just doesn't work. So out of the 3 major conflicts that were given within the DM's guide, the 2024 book, your players will likely only be able to address one of them. These other books full of content can help, these box sets, these books can help you fill out what happened in the areas that your players didn't go, setting the stage for your next campaign perhaps, or giving you ideas for more stuff. The last book I'm going to recommend is the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer. This is a 3rd edition book. This was set up in, 2001? Let me zoom in. 2000, released in 2000 for the start of 3rd edition. This is probably one of the more comprehensive books. You're not going to get a lot of pictures. You're not going to get any maps. You're not going to get much out of here, but big blocks of information. Okay, one of the popular terms running around in the D&D sphere, it's actually fading lately, was the idea of a West Marches campaign. That multiple GMs can run multiple games at multiple times in a fixed setting that the players can choose when to play, who they play, and what they want to do. Sounds like Adventurers League as well, right? Living Greyhawk set the campaign setting of Greyhawk, set it up to run as a West Marches campaign. The idea was each of the regions of the world got to run a physical geographic section of Greyhawk and focus their adventures there. And all of that stuff was built back into the RPG Association, the predecessor to Adventurers League, and then published as canonical stuff. Number 1, this moves the timeline up a lot farther, but this is probably going to be your most detailed one-stop shop for Greyhawk information. So if you've been into it, you've been enjoying the ideas of the setting, you've enjoyed the readings, you want to do more with it, but it still seems pretty heavy. That's a big world full of lots of countries that I have to flesh out. Who knows what's going on in all those woods and all those canyons and all those this and that. 5E's book, the 2024 book, gave me a sentence that says there might be a blue dragon living in the Rift Crag. But damn, you might want more. You might need more. You may not. You might be perfectly happy taking that little seed and turning it into a huge world-spanning adventure, and that's awesome. And I salute you and tear it up. But if you need more, there is a lot more out there. Okay, that's kind of what I want to take a few minutes and show you guys some of the other. First, the original source and some of the other major publications. Now, this is not the exhaustive list. This is not the be-all, end-all for Greyhawk sources. There is a lot of content out there, namely in the form of modules, Dragon Magazine articles, Dungeon Magazine articles, Living Greyhawk publications, all of that. Don't stress it. If you want more, there is more. If the Greyhawk setting was enough to make you intrigued and you're ready to tear it up based on what was in the 2024 book, you're good to go, man. There is enough there to turn it into your own world and have a great time, and no one can say boo. But if you want more, or if you're a lore-driven person, or if you just like to know stuff, man, rest assured there's a library of content for Greyhawk that will help you flesh out your world, that does a lot of the middle level management for you. It's not getting into the granular details. It's not giving you dungeons and dungeon keys and lists of NPCs. Think of this as the 5e book was the elevator pitch for Greyhawk. The Greyhawk Adventures, these box sets, think of that as the middle management. Hey, here's a list of things that you need to pay attention to when you're running this. And that leaves you to get into the details and really make it work and individualize the content to match the needs of your party. Okay, there's something within the world of Greyhawk that will appeal to every player. Our job as the Dungeon Masters is to flesh it out and make it work. These are simply more tools to add to your toolbox to save you steps. For example, the Living Greyhawk, the 3E. We'll zoom in on this a little bit and scroll on down a tiny wee bit and get into some spots. I'm struggling here all of a sudden. This is a big ass section on the king. What are we looking at? The bandit kingdoms, as it breaks them down into each of the small regions. So it's going to give you the idea of each of the tiny little things that are part of the bandit kingdoms. It's going to give you who's the allies, who's the enemy, how many people are living here, the major towns, the town populations. So you get names of towns, you get names of NPCs, you get a general demographic breakdown of who lives here. The idea here isn't to make you do things. The idea is here to give you framework and guidance that you can go, so that you can make it your own. And there's a huge variety of people that are living in here. So it's useful information for world building. It's very useful information for campaign planning. When you're rolling up on the town of Gloucester, how big is the town of Gloucester? If you probably didn't even know Gloucester existed from the 5e book. So you may make the mistake of saying it's a town of 100 people. And that can impact spreading out from there. So having these resources can be helpful to guide your world building at greater details. Cool? Cool. The other source, and I don't necessarily want to waste a ton of time going through them, but the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of Greyhawk's lore is inferred in modules. You're not necessarily going to be able to find a one-stop. There's a few wikis out there. Greyhawk Cannon Fire is actually a pretty good site that gives you a lot of fan fiction stories based on Dragon magazine articles. It brings a lot of the stuff that's been lost to time back into a digital format so you can still use it to fill in and build your world. But above all else, as I finish this video to show, like I said, showing off some stuff, acknowledging as we end, 2024's version of Greyhawk is slightly different than the first edition. It's very similar to the 1980 publication of the folio. It is vastly different from the Out of the Ashes book, and it's nowhere near the Greyhawk Living Gazetteer for 3rd edition. Remember, those have all moved the timeline forward, so the world has changed. Use whichever timeline you want, use whatever information you want, but above all else, never forget, this is your world. Once you decide to run stuff in Greyhawk, you turn it into what you want. You get rid of the kingdoms that you don't want, you change names, and because you still have the good lore baked in, you have the history baked in, you have all of the ideas of the conflicts that are baked in, and it's just up to you to expand out for your groups. If you need more, there is more, but there's nowhere near, and this is a good thing, I promise you, there's nowhere near the volumes of lore that you have to deal with with Forgotten Realms. If you wanted to use a published setting, but the idea of using Forgotten Realms is so overwhelming, or it's, let's be honest, it's been done to fucking death, 10 years of adventures in the Sword Coast is enough to make anyone sick of the Sword Coast. Especially as a dungeon. I want to go somewhere else. I'm so sick of the Forgotten Realms. Greyhawk's calling you, brother. I want to get into world building, but it seems scary. Greyhawk's calling to you. The continent's done, but you get to practice filling in all the details. And then when you're ready for round 2, you can do your own world and your own continent from there. If you want to revisit some classic stuff and you want to do a little bit more of a grim, dark campaign, Greyhawk's calling to you, man. This will fill in a lot of space, but make no mistake, you still have a lot of work to do as a DM to make the setting your own. That's the whole goal of it, right? Give you the ideas, let you run wild with them, and let you customize them to fit your party. But I'm going to go ahead and finish up this video. Like I said, the main thing I wanted to do, because I didn't want to spend a ton of time in our other videos, making sure that you guys are aware there's a lot out there. Greyhawk has been around for a long time. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's forgotten. There's some great content that can help you plan better encounters, better adventures. A lot of awesome personalities that have been buried in the lore of the setting for a long time. Some outstanding storylines. Most of the big magic items, most of the big NPCs, most of the stuff that we play with nowadays started here. Crook of Rao, Black Razor, Daod's Wondrous Lanthorn, Demonicon of Igwilv, Apparatus of Qualish, Mordenkainen, Bigby, Ottaluk, Rary, Tensor, Tasha. All of these people started in Greyhawk, man. You're going to have a great place to connect with the deep lore of D&D when you jump into here. And more importantly, Wizards ain't doing shit with it after this, so you can have a lot of fun turning it into your own version without being invalidated later. Cool, man. That's it. This is what I had to get it off my chest. Didn't feel like I was doing the setting justice. Didn't feel like I was doing my favorite setting justice if I didn't pause and say, y'all, there's a ton of shit out here for you. If you need it, it's there. If you don't, you're still okay. But hey, thank you guys for joining me for this little video. We're going to pick up Chapter 6 in the Dungeon Master's Guide moving forward into the series. I invite you guys to like, follow, subscribe, do all of the cool things. Join us over on Twitch Tuesdays through Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time. DM Geezer Jim, same channel name that you found right here. Matter of fact, if you click down on the About stuff, you'll find some links to some other stuff for us. We'd love to see you there. But more importantly, thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys continuing along with the series, and we'll be back for the next chapter soon. Y'all be safe.